So hi everyone, I'm Ray, host of Tech Buzz China. And as you know, we are a podcast focusing on China tech. So today is our first webinar targeted towards investors. I think everyone here is an investor. Some of you have turned in questions in advance, but we mean for this session to be highly interactive. So we will go through the questions that you did turn in advance, but then we should have plenty of time for Q&A. So without further ado, I will just get started. And we have some slides prepared for you guys. So let me I always forget where the present, there you go, present option is. And here we are. So I will be sharing my screen. Everyone can see it, right? If you can't see it, please say something. So today is our pilot webinar series. Like I said, our agenda is I'm going to go through really quick housekeeping and an introduction of our speaker. And then we have a presentation from Annie. She's prepared several slides to get the conversation started. And then we basically have Q&A. So it's designed to be really, really interactive. So light housekeeping. I believe some of you are already Tech Buzz China listeners, but if you are not, please check us out. We do have a website now, techbuzzchina.com, and everything about our show, as well as our newsletter and any events we're running is on there. We're heavily focused on tech. Today, the reason why we're doing luxury retail is, number one, because I know Annie and I know she really knows her stuff, but also because, I think luxury retail is being impacted by, or has been impacted by, e-commerce and other digital trends for quite a few years now in China. And Annie will talk about that because she's also in charge of the digital business, not just the offline retail business. We do have a newsletter now. I just flipped it actually to transcripts of our podcasts and community events for the free version. And then there is a very, very low cost, $2 a month extra buzz, which is basically where we write stuff on China tech that don't make it into the podcast. And that's just once every 2 weeks. It's about a 10-minute read. It's usually an in-depth discussion on one of the trending headline topics. That's basically what we like to do. So whatever is catching headlines in China tech, we talk about it in greater depth and provide a lot of context. Usually I like to think things that aren't covered by other Western media. So you can follow us on Twitter, Tech Buzz China. My name, Ruima, my co-host, Ying Ying, the Pan Daily, and SubChina, who also distribute us. Okay, so that brings us to Annie. I've already sent most of you Annie's bio in advance. I know there's a few last-minute signups, but in case you didn't get it or didn't get a chance to read it, Annie has over 16 years of experience in marketing and retail. She's currently the Asia Pacific president of Stella McCartney, which is a very well-known global boutique luxury brand. And she reports directly to the global CEO. Specifically, she runs 4 business entities under the brand, and that includes nearly 30 directly owned stores, as well as wholesale, franchise, and digital businesses for mainland China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, and Australia. So if you have broader questions even beyond China, although China is the focus of today's presentation, feel free to ask them in the Q&A as well. And prior to Stella McCartney, Annie was the China GM for Shanghai Tang, which is like, if you have been to Asia, it's a very popular brand there, luxury brand. So, and Annie graduated from University of Chicago and Harvard University. She's born in California, and she's fluent in both Chinese and English. So she is speaking to us from Shanghai, and I will let her get started. So Annie, just let me know when you want me to go on to the next slide.
Thanks, Ray. You can start with the next slide.
Yeah.
The content slide, next one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about, I guess, like the recent happenings in China, like in terms of how the macroeconomy is affecting luxury consumption overall in the China market. In essence, so as of Q4 last year, actually things were really great. So LVMH was reporting a plus 24% versus previous year as of end of last year, and Kering Group was about like 20%, of which like Bottega Veneta was like something about plus 24% as well. Some of the brands or some of the groups that aren't doing so well in China right now are like Burberry, Tod's Group, Ferragamo. So these are the brands that are considered like slowing down. But overall, like the luxury market in China was looking pretty well before COVID-19 started to take its toll on the market. So basically, even as of end of January, things were generally quite strong in the luxury market in China. So my brand, for example, as of end of China was reporting a plus 30% versus January last year. So it was actually quite optimistic for us before the virus started hitting us. And then, of course, then the virus started hitting us end of January, and then in February, business really, really slowed down. For example, in February, like my physical stores capacity was down to about 40% because most of the stores were either operating under shortened hours or they were closed. And then back to and then things started to getting better in March, but still we are seeing that it's still quite slow. It's not as fast as most people would think. So, for example, in March, the service industry PMI, the Purchase Manager Index from China is returning to around 52, which is 16.3% improvement from February, showing that there is some sort of business recovering. And then just for an index of comparison, USA is about 49.1, which is a 2% decrease from February. So at the same time, as of March, around end of March 25th, so 96.6% of the large and medium-sized enterprises surveyed by the Purchasing Manager Index in China had resumed work, whereby in February, based on what I know, like 60% of the factories were opened, and then most of them were open because the government asked them to, to open to cater to the needs of supplies. So a lot of actually like the textile factories in China were converted into mask factories like at that time. So then the YTD stock, Shanghai Stock Exchange Index declined about 9.9%, which is quite small. So people are thinking that is pretty controlled under the circumstances. Overall, Chinese people really like to buy stocks. So most of my local friends, they are on the stock, like they have a stock app. So they are on their app almost like maybe twice every day. And most of the people I know are involved in the stock market. So which means that this is like the Shanghai Stock Exchange Index is actually quite a good index for people's, I guess, their appetite for consumption. Next slide. And then, so just to share a little bit about Hong Kong, since I also oversee it, Hong Kong is still quite dim at the moment. So previously, Hong Kong was one of the strongest markets, like under my region. And then, of course, like since quarter three last year, the impact from the protests were really kicking in. So a lot of the stores were also down by sales and down by traffic, and then whereby actually the operational expenses in Hong Kong market is much higher than in China. So Hong Kong is actually still very much struggling this year. As of March, the PMI is returning to about 34.9, which is a slight improvement from February, but it's not a much significant improvement. And plus, in recent weeks, like due to like the additional cases of the COVID patients from like people returning from abroad, so Hong Kong is again like reinforcing something like a 50% operating capacity, both in terms of retail, in terms of restaurants, in terms of offices. And then YTD Hong Kong Hang Seng Stock Index is declined by 18.9%, which is quite a significant decline. Next slide. In terms of the outlook of the luxury market in China, so as of end of March, and basically the Q1 report, the global luxury sales estimate is estimated to decline between 25 to 30%. And then out of this decline, of course, like based on past like records, Chinese people are contributing to about 35% of the global luxury consumption. So the impact for the iconic luxury brands is less significant than that of the premium luxury or designer labels. So for example, LVMH and Kering Group both reported about a 15% decline in Q1 versus Q2 2020. And then within China, economy is starting to rebound. So from what I know, like iconic luxury brands such as Dior and Chanel, they are already benchmarking their 2019 sales in March this year. So other iconic brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, they're also showing a fast rebound. So they are actually quite optimistic about their sales for the remaining of the year. Luxury brands which are focusing on accessories, which are items that you don't need to try and you don't really have any size issues, so it's easier to buy online. These brands are rebounding faster. So mid-level luxury brands such as Stella McCartney, which I run, and other brands like Givenchy, Chloe, in which the contribution of ready-to-wear business is higher than the accessory business. These brands are really suffering and they are still rebounding quite slowly. Next slide.
Yeah, this
Ray,
is the
do you see
slide.
like, oh,
Yeah, this is a slide where I
okay, okay,
redacted the sales. So Annie
okay,
provided a
okay,
bunch
okay.
of sales, and then I just redacted the sensitive revenue and traffic data.
It's okay.
But you can
Anyway,
see
so
the,
this slide shows like basically highlighted in yellow is Stella McCartney's performance overall, like key iconic shopping centers and malls in China. And then the other lines are the net figures for competitors. So if we look at the key performance indexes that we look at for retail, we look at sales, and then we look at traffic, and then we look at average ticket. We can see that basically the sales and traffic decline is kind of on the same progress. And then in terms of the average ticket, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. It shows that basically people are spending about 20-25% less than what they used to, like even if they purchase something. So this basically means that people are probably just taking items that are easier to buy. They don't need to try. They are more concerned with their wallet than before, so they're cautious about how they spend. So basically, it just overall shows like a downtrend in people's consumption behavior. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of basically what's happening in the luxury market in China, so there is currently and going to be a lot more domestic spending than before. So due to the continued restrictions on travel, most of my friends are basically they're here and then they're spending here. So most of the luxury purchases that would have been made abroad will now happen in China. And then I guess even after the travel restrictions are lifted, it's going to take a bit of time for people to really to resume the traveling that they have been doing. And also plus, I think due to the protest impact from Hong Kong last year, already a lot of the luxury consumers, they stopped to shop in Hong Kong and then they purchased back in China. There is currently ongoing just anxiety among top luxury consumers that the goods are going to be depleted soon because everybody's aware that factories in Europe are closed and they don't know how long the factories are closed. So from what I know, like in one of the key luxury shopping malls in China, Plaza 66 downstairs, like there's a queue in Chanel like almost every day today. I mean, in recent week. And then there is, of course, an expected accelerated shift from physical stores into digital shopping. So people are looking at live streaming, Tmall stores, WeChat mini programs, WeChat stores, all these platforms that can offer products outside of the physical store are booming. So even Louis Vuitton actually just did their first ever live streaming session, which is based in their Plaza 66 store. They did it about 1.5 weeks ago. And it was really like quite surprising to the luxury market because usually luxury brands they stay away from live streaming, they stay away from all these Tmall chat mini program stuff because they feel the physical boutique offers the whole rounded experience of luxury that the brand is all about. Next slide. So basically, some consulting agencies such as Bain and Company, they are saying that ethics are becoming more important, and then consumers are going to be more and more environmentally and socially conscious. I think because I work in a brand in which sustainability is one of our core DNA, based on what I know of all the focus groups that I've done, of all the consumers I've spoken to, sustainability is affecting the way that post 80s and post 10s, I mean, post 00s are as purchasing, but not really the post 70s and post 80s who are still the core luxury consumers of the China market. So in fact, I think everybody there's just hype all around, millennials, but in reality, the people who are really buying and affording luxury is still like the post 80s and post 70s. And then so for this group of people, I don't really think what's happening right now will really make them change the way that they live. There is strengthen there's this mode of like strengthen local pride. So Chinese consumers typically they have been known to be quite sensitive to threats to national pride. So there those so I guess people know about like the kind of like the case with Dolce Gabbana and then with Versace t-shirts, all that. So basically they get quite offensively and Chinese consumers get quite offensive easily. So the COVID-19 situation, I think, has further exacerbated the threat they feel and heightened the sense of national pride. So luxury brands moving forward from this, they need to take into extra consideration of potential punctures to the Chinese sensitivity. And at the same time, this could also be an opportunity so you can ride on the Chinese pride to develop products and communications. What this means is like just adapt. First of all, think more about Chinese consumers when you are actually doing the design or when you are actually doing the communication. You can work with like local key opinion leaders more, or you can do like more collaborations that are more relevant to Chinese culture. Next slide. Okay, so something that has arisen from amidst the COVID-19 situation is price sensitivity. So due to the macroeconomic situation, and there's also insecurity from political tensions, um, and also like people really don't know when the progress of the COVID-19 virus will be put on a hold. So although people still have this desire for luxury products and they do want to shop, do want to consume, but people still reconsider their wallet situation before they actually spend. So what this means is that there is going to be an increase in the number of outlets in China. There are a lot of friends and family sales activities ongoing, and my friends and family sale is actually also open to pretty much semi open to public because everybody knows some friends and they can get some access to it. And then places like Farfetch, for example, like Farfetch, because of all the fulfillment from Europe and US is not happening at the moment. So now Farfetch is talking to all the brands and asking brands to fulfill from China. So Farfetch is going to increase their advertising and communication in China. There are other channels that people can buy cheaper products. For example, they can refer to their friends' moments. A lot of people are selling things on their WeChat, basically, like secondhand products, vintage products. All of these are going to be, I guess, like the future trend in the coming year. Next slide. Yeah, I think that is.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I think that's it. I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah.
Yes, those are the slides I prepared.
Yeah. So that's perfect because it's about 15 minutes. So we have lots of time for questions. So I think what we're going to do is Annie already sent you the list of sort of 10 questions, but I will do the sent questions and then we will open it for Q&A. So there's about 10 questions that were sent in advance. So let me start off with one of them. So in your opinion, who has the best online platform for luxury in China and why?
Burberry used to have it. So Burberry has invested a lot of money on Chinese e-commerce. So they're also the first luxury brand who have a Tmall store. I think they're also one of the first ones that have like a WeChat store. And I think with Burberry, they've been very, very active on digital. It's just that up to, I guess, like up to about 2 years ago, before they changed the designer, they were having a really difficult time. But then in recent year, like because of the designer change, so there's also a comeback.
Got it. Has there been any, I'm just going to ask more around sort of e-commerce, et cetera. Has there been any structural changes around e-commerce post-COVID? You had mentioned, people selling on WeChat, doing sort of cloud shopping, et cetera. But is there anything that's like fundamentally different, or these are just increases of what was happening before? And then, sorry, the second part of that question is, for offline focus, actually maybe if that person is on, they can ask the question themselves, because I'm a little confused. They also asked about offshore versus onshore a year from now. So both the digital
Is it
part.
offshore versus onshore?
Yeah. Actually,
I think
just,
offshore means
yeah,
you're buying abroad, and then onshore means you're buying within China.
got it. That might be, yeah, that might be what they're asking.
So the question is, what's the difference in ratio of purchase?
It's two questions actually. It's one on the e-commerce strategy. Is there anything that's
Yeah.
been completely different, and then also on the offshore versus onshore, especially if we look forward a year. What is your opinion?
Okay. So in terms of the e-commerce, so basically, from last year, from year 2019, there's already been a lot of changes in terms of e-commerce strategy and structure in luxury brands in China. So for example, like Gucci launched their WeChat store, which is very successful because they are very serious about it. They have built a team of about 15 people, like 15 headcounts to do their WeChat store. And then so and other brands who like Louis Vuitton, like Chanel, like they all have like online stores right now. And then so I think brands are really investing in their e-commerce offer even before the COVID. I think what COVID is going to do is that COVID is going to speed it up a little bit. And then what it's going to do is that it's going to make brands readjust their marketing budget so that more of the budget goes into digital rather than like offline advertising. And then plus, I think the type of events will also change. So previously, like brands would regularly do things like exhibits. They would do like fashion shows. They would have celebrities come and do this and that. I think in the future, there's going to be more interaction online rather than offline. Like for example, when Vuitton did the live streaming about 1.5 weeks ago, what they did was they invited a female actress to be kind of like the person to interact with a host. So there was a celebrity, just that it's not like in a physical space. And then with that, what that means is that it actually just reaches out to even more people.
Versus just the
And then
people at the event. Yeah.
yeah, instead of people just at the event, it's reaching out to a wider public. And in fact, like actually because several brands had to cancel or readjust their show on the Paris Fashion Week recently. So so basically, what I know is that like with brands with huge money on their hands, like Louis Vuitton and like Chanel, what they did immediately was that they changed the format of their show to become like a kind of like a live streaming show. So the models are still there, they're still walking. It's just like nobody's at the show. Everybody's just watching based on their invitation. So when we do sales campaign, like I do sales campaign about 4 to 6 times a year, like in Europe, whereby everybody comes to the showroom, I present a collection, I have my buyers from abroad, and then I will have to ask them to place the orders basically. So I think in the future, what's going to happen is like the sales campaign is going to be done like maybe through online instead of offline more often. So for example, I know that definitely for the upcoming sales campaign, like I would have to do is through live streaming. So it's like a virtual space thing.
For your
Yeah.
buyers. Okay. And the offshore versus onshore mix.
I think it's going to be like what I already said in the slide is a lot of the customers, they will have to be buying back in China. And then when they get, the thing is the price gap between local consumer and local luxury goods and like the luxury goods offered abroad is closing. So for example, Chanel, the price gap is about 10 to 15% already. And then so I know Louis Vuitton is still quite high. Louis Vuitton is about 30-35% price gap. Gucci is about 25-30% price gap, but then people are closing the gap so that there's more consumption onshore rather than offshore. And then for Chinese customers, I think they are also noticing that it's actually really difficult to get the goods that they want when they are traveling abroad because they have to queue for it, they have to be on a VIP list. Everything that they want, the most must-have desirable products, they're always out of stock. Whereby, like in China, kind of like the brands make sure they have enough stock. So in terms of true luxury consumption, like the people who like I want this product, I don't really care about that price gap of 2,000 3,000 RMB. They would probably consume more often within mainland, especially for this year because of I think due to like the virus situation. Actually, most of the brands that I know, they managed to ship out like kind of whatever they have on hand, like before before warehouses start to close down in Italy and in Paris. So which means that for during the latter half of the year, China is going to have more inventory than Europe. And then so once people get used to shopping back home, there's this like relationship with the sales associate locally. There's this feeling that it's actually not really that much more expensive. The service here is so much better. It's so much more convenient. I think more onshore purchase is going to happen.
Got it. Well, that's good for your business. So, next question. So, you previously worked for a Chinese luxury brand, right? So, um, without going to maybe super specific details, could you just give us like sort of your general observations on how that differs from an international brand? And then, if you think Chinese luxury brands are emerging, actually, I mean, I think a lot of people think they are, but I would love to know your opinion.
Chinese luxury brands are emerging, but I guess really not in a sense that's comparable to the European luxury brands. So it's like within luxury, there is a sense that you need history for it. You need some sort of brand stories, and then you need all this legendary stuff that people can talk about. With Chinese luxury brands, like it's quite difficult for them to really put that in because it just doesn't the history or the history just doesn't exist. Yeah. And then for example, I know like I think the top luxury Chinese brand in China right now is Sangsha, which is invested by the Hermes group. They have been struggling like forever, but it's just like because they're backed financially enough, so they can still continue to sustain their business. But in reality, their expenses, like operational expenses, are too high for what they're making. So I used to work in Shanghai Tang. So Shanghai Tang was actually a Hong Kong brand, but it was operated by Richemont by the time I joined the brand. And then under Richemont influence is actually very much considered like a foreign brand. It's frankly speaking like most of the people who are on the senior management, almost everybody is a foreigner. And then it's very French based. So the chairman was French, the creative director was French, the CFO was French, because Richemont as a group is very French based. Like there's a lot of French people in there. So there is this kind of European culture that is like kind of operating the company, like, and it reflects in the way that the company, I guess, presents itself to consumers. Like for example, the designer that we used to use in Shanghai Tang, they were never like locals. They were never Chinese. The last designer that was in Shanghai Tang before the brand was sold was Italian. And then before that, there was the one agent that I know of is Jason Lee. So he is a Hong Kongese, but he was educated in Europe. So he's basically not very Chinese. He doesn't speak Mandarin at all. Anyway, so in that case, like I think the difference between Shanghai Tang and maybe like a brand like Stella is that Shanghai Tang as a Chinese like or as like a Chinese born brand, like they do their fashion show in China instead of abroad. So Stella McCartney never does fashion shows in China. They always do like fashion show and the Paris Fashion Week because being in the Fashion Week is kind of like quite iconic for a luxury brand. It shows that you are a luxury brand. Whereas in Shanghai Tang, like basically it's not really positioned as a top luxury. It's more like a premium price. And the second, like basically because they're speaking to the Chinese consumers, so they decided to the strategy was to invest a lot back home rather than abroad. And then yeah, I guess that is one of the key differences. You're still speaking to the same group of customers. And then I think rather than say that whether it's a Chinese brand or it's like a foreign luxury brand, it's more like how much, how much you decide to invest in your communication, like in terms of the ratio of budget, marketing budget versus your revenue. And then at the same time, like where do you do the communication and then which are the touch points that you use? These are, I guess, the key differentiation, key differences between luxury brands.
I'm going to ask two more questions and then we'll open it up. So the one question that was sent to me via chat is, okay, so, you observe that a lot of trends in luxury retail are helping with the rebound, right? So move to online, lower spend. What observed luxury retail trends such as fast rebound, moving to online, luxury, lower spends due to uncertainty, all these things that you discussed earlier during the presentation, do you think could maybe be generalized to the broader Chinese consumer? So not just people consuming luxury products, but do you see this impacting other consumers in other sectors?
Well, I mean, purchasing locally instead of abroad is generally speaking like across the board. So it's because of travel restrictions, like generally speaking, even for cosmetics, people used to get cosmetics from daigous in Korea, but due to the virus situation, like my Korean clients are telling me that there's nobody in Shinsegae Mall, and then there's nobody in Gangnam. Like all the daigous are gone. So basically, cosmetic business is actually booming quite well in China. Despite all of this, from what I heard, not the physical stores, but because cosmetics already like they have a lot of online business. So the online business is quite booming for them. And then I guess other product segments where you have to consume at home, like based on the current situation. So I guess it applies to all product industries.
Got it. That's interesting about cosmetics. I had just tweeted right before our call that like I was expecting some types of cosmetics to go down by a lot because people are wearing masks, so they don't need any more lipstick, but we'll see. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then if I didn't get to your question, please just unmute yourself or raise your hand and then unmute yourself, and then we can call you. So one of the questions that came in was, do you think that the one-child policy had any positive impact on luxury? And if so, do you think it's sustainable? I think what this person might be trying to ask is like, now you have a little bit more leeway, right? Like the one-child policy has effectively is no longer in play. So do you see that, I don't know, affecting people's luxury consumption in any way? Might be like too far out, by the way, because that thing was just overturned a couple years ago.
Well, I haven't been in China like I think long enough to really see how what the one-child policy has affected, consumption behavior here. But I can compare, luxury consumptions here versus, that in Taiwan or in Hong Kong, whereby there isn't a one-child policy. I would say that overall, like because of the one-child policy here, most of the people my age, they don't really have much to worry about their financials because both their parents come with property. And then okay, so and then I'm a little bit there's a little bit of bias here because I live in Shanghai. So and then most of my friends are of a certain net worth. So in any case, so most of my local Chinese friends, they don't really have much to worry about their financial situation because worst come worst, they already have two houses. and then 2 properties under their names. All this they can mortgage, they can, they can sell it, they don't really have to pay rent. They don't even need to think about, I need to make adequate money in order to buy a house. So, which means that they have free money to use. And then if they have free money to use, then, they will spend it on things that they like. So it just happens to be luxury products. They are luxury because they are more desirable. And then, so I do think that the one-child policy does affect the people, does that affect, I guess, their mental financing, like mental accounting, and then their consumption behavior, rather than, for example, in Taiwan. In Taiwan, where most of the people my age, both of their parents are in the working class. Taiwan is a place where the middle class is probably constitute about 70% of the population, right? And then so everybody is very conscious about the way that they spend. They're always looking for deals. That's why, like in Taiwan, like the department stores, the sales in the malls and department stores are very much driven by promotions. Whereas in China, it's not. In China, like luxury consumption is driven by new arrivals. Like my friends who are buying luxury, like they want to get things that arrive, as soon as they can. They don't really need to wait for markdown. Whereby in Taiwan, it's really more about, when is the next promotion thing, and then when is the next, like, 满千返百, like get 100 deducted when you make, 1,000 purchase. So I think there's just the one-child policy does play in a role in, I guess, overall the mentality of how I spend money.
I definitely am more like a Taiwanese consumer then. So, okay, if you would, I think it's a little hard for me to see if you, but if you can just maybe unmute yourself, and then if you have any questions, just ask Annie directly. I was going to try to moderate, but I think it's actually easier since we don't have that many people.
Okay, I'll give it a go. It's Joshua here. Hi, Annie.
Hi,
Just
Joshua.
yeah, hi. So just a first question would be like what you're talking about, luxury consumer profile or cohorts, if you want to say. I'm very curious because I recently came across a study from McKinsey that was saying that like 56% of luxury spend in China is from post 80s and another 23% is from post 90s, or you say is it Gen X or Gen Z, but it's basically younger people. I from your experience, how important are these younger cohorts of millennials and the age groups younger than them, and how are they financing their purchases? Is it, as what you just mentioned, are these mainly financed through parents, money, or like existing wealth, or do you see something else in the general broader cohorts?
Okay, so first of all, I think I'm not sure how McKinsey report defined their luxury consumption. There are several ways to define it. Some people consider luxury cosmetics like also within luxury consumption. But actually, like when I mentioned about like true luxury, it's more like people who are, kind of like really the high net worth individuals at the top of the triangle in China, basically. So they are the ones who, there's a difference between, being able to buy a luxury bag a year versus you buy it every month. And then so for most of, the core luxury consumers in China, they are still the ones who are repeated shopping, repeated purchase customers. They are, for Louis Vuitton, for example, the way that they define their top VIC is by how much ready to wear they purchase. Because there's also a difference between like, being able to buy one Louis Vuitton bag like per year versus, I've already moved beyond, the bags. Now I'm rich enough to, to even wear like Louis Vuitton ready to wear. So for most of the people who are, at that, higher level of luxury consumption, like they are usually at post 80s or post 70s. There's very few like post 90s that would, really to spend that much money on luxury ready to wear. And then that also reflects in my brand because my brand is mostly a ready to wear driven brand. And then so back to your other question about like how millennials and 90s they how do they finance their luxury consumption? So basically, I think there are two types of post 90s or even younger like luxury consumers from what I observe. One is they're kind of like the second generation, so they don't really have to work. so their parents finance everything for them. Usually they do have some investments of their own. They probably do have their own businesses, but most of the money is like family money. The parents, due to the one-child policy, the parents put a lot of money in their children, and then basically whatever the children ask for, generally speaking, they get it. So that is one type of consumer, and then the other type are, generally speaking, people like myself, people younger than me, of course, but they are white-collar workers and multinationals. They are making a decent living. They don't have to worry about financing for their living per se, because they don't need to buy houses, they don't have installments, so they have free money to use for luxury consumption. So I think there are two ways that, or I guess two types of young luxury consumer types. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Ryan, I know you have a question. Did you want to ask it?
Yes, I do actually. Hi, Annie. Thanks for this great presentation. I want to ask actually a question about, I guess it's maybe more like just a theoretical question or something to use your imagination about. It's kind of like, if a Chinese luxury brand were to break out and succeed, maybe looking back 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what do you think that would look like? Because currently, as I can see, the product mix available to the Chinese luxury consumer is exclusively foreign, and that drives against the current nationalistic pride, that is resurgent.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So um, basically, so I've actually looked into this quite in depth when I was in my previous company. So I had this question of, why is it so difficult to make a Chinese luxury brand? What is it about, Chinese characteristics of luxury that is just not coming through to the consumers? So in my study, I realized that most of the most expensive or the most exquisite craftsmanship offered by Chinese culture are things like embroidery. There are embroidery that is passed down from basically uh, 2,000-3,000 years ago, and then that is only provided to the imperial courts. There are very expensive tea leaves. There's very expensive maltai, and then some of the jade stones, emerald products from China. These are considered the finest offer from the Chinese culture. And then of course porcelain, and then all that. But then in terms of like fabric, in terms of design, and then in terms of leather, the use of leather, basically the history or the luxury positioning of these aspects of luxury is just not high enough from the Chinese culture. So that's why it's very difficult for a Chinese brand to really position itself as a luxury brand, like without tapping into all these foreign elements. For example, it's very difficult for a Chinese brand to really succeed without getting the help from a foreign designer. So if you compare a Chinese brand who is borrowing foreign elements versus a foreign brand which is already using foreign elements, for like 100 years or more, is there's, I think the starting line is actually already quite different. So I think Chinese brands do have a potential, but it's going to take, I think, 50 years for them to establish themselves, because with luxury brand you need to have history. You need to have a lot of these stories to tell. You need to have this thing. Patek Philippe is always talking about how things, true luxury is passed down from the grandparent to the father to the child. You need to be able to, all of these kind of things that are pertinent to luxury, like they are time dependent. So Chinese brands, they just need adequate time to develop itself. I think a fast win for Chinese luxury brands would be to do a lot of collaborations. So as I said, like you can borrow elements from Western brands. So for example, if today, I guess like Li-Ning, for example. Li-Ning started Li-Ning is not really a luxury though, but so as an example, so Li-Ning started a line called the Li-Ning, 中国 Li-Ning, like China Li-Ning. So within this group of products, like basically they hire all foreign designers, and then so to do like really innovative, like more trendy products rather than the traditional athletic wear products. So that product is actually selling very well in China right now because people find it trendy, people find it hot. But then it's not really the same as luxury because it's not going to last for a long time. It doesn't really have that classicness to it, and it's not for everybody. Um, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
I will ask another. Okay, there's more questions from Joshua, but I will ask another question from the list we had earlier, which is, is it too early to start identifying who are going to be the winners and losers after this crisis in the luxury retail sector? And also, is any help being provided by the government and banks to make sure that these businesses survive? And if so, is that assistance enough?
Okay, so I think in terms of, I guess, physical retail in China, one of the key expenses is rent. So although the government is not like subsidizing for rent per se, but what they're doing is they are recommending landlords to lower their rent. So essentially, like within the key malls in China, there are several types of malls. So there's the types that are locally run, so like Wangfujing Group or like Mixi, for example. So most of these Chinese like government-run like projects, they have waived all their basic rents like for the months of February, March, and probably will do so for April. There are the Hong Kong landlords like Unlong Group or Wharf from Tang. So basically, these Hong Kong groups, they are typically waiving off 50% of their basic rental. So these are what like in terms of landlords, the type of support that they're providing to businesses. And at the same time, during this difficult time, so companies can actually apply to waive part of their contribution to their originally like I guess mandatory contribution to staff benefits, like in terms of what they call like the 五险一金, like their staff insurances, medical insurance, things like this. So I think companies can save about minimal like 10% up to 20% of wages based on this, I guess, government policy. So government will subsidize on this. And then there are some tax savings, like various companies, they can apply for tax savings like based on their current situation. And then they can defer payment to banks. So a lot of companies who have actually loans from the banks, like based on the government support, like they are able to defer the loan payment. So within China, like there is this policy, and then in Hong Kong, like like brands can apply for about I think 80K Hong Kong dollars worth of subsidization from the government per physical store. So I am applying for it right now.
But could you talk about maybe those are the assistance that the government's providing? Do you think, number one, do you think that's enough? And then also, how do you look at, how should we think about winners and losers coming out of this crisis?
Well, in reality, like I think it's always going to be the top luxury brands are going to be winners because they have a much their wallets are just so much deeper. So they can reinvest like when it's right to invest, and then for example they have money to do live streaming, they have money to invite celebrities to do all that like online for them, and then they have ways to, so let's say for example brands like my brand like midsize, and then what we're doing is like we're really struggling with our financial situation, like in terms of our P&L statements, right? And then so we don't really have that excess amount in our bank account to do investments, whereas the top luxury brands like Dior, like LV, they do. So what's going to happen is like coming out of this, I think the gap between top luxury brands like versus like middle luxury brands are going to be pulled like even further. And then also like in terms of, I know like the worldwide situation, we're all European brands. Most of the luxury brands are European based. So most of the brands that are of my scale, we are having trouble with production. We are having trouble with our upcoming collection because literally the designers cannot get together to design. Whereas like for brands like Dior, Louis Vuitton, they have like, 8 to 12 um, collections or mini collections like within a year. So, and they have a much more larger team rather like compared to us. So it's easier for them to bounce back from this, like in terms of design, in terms of supplying and production than us. And that this is going to affect us, for at least 12 months. And then so, the gap between large brands and small brands are just going to be bigger and bigger.
Thank you for that. I think Joshua has another question. If someone else has one, please message me so I can put you on. Yeah.
Okay, so second question is, I guess, related to marketing, or how you would address the marketing funnel in China. I'm just very curious. When it comes to live streaming that you mentioned just now, Annie, is that more a top of funnel engagement, attention building tool, or do you actually see that being a bottom of funnel conversion and actually generating GMV at that point of time? How important is live streaming, and where does it sit?
I think live streaming is very important in the coming months because people are just not physically able to be, in certain places at certain times. They're just not physically able to host physical events. So I think live streaming is going to be used quite often, like maybe in the coming 3 to 6 months. However, like I think many of the luxury consumers, they are still not very used to shopping through live streaming. They still want that, face-to-face contact. They still want that, I want to touch this and that, and then I want to, have it on me. I want to be able to shop with my friends. And then, have that whole day of afternoon tea and then shopping and then, a nice Michelin dinner or something. So all that is not offered through live streaming. So I think live streaming is going to be important in the contribution of, additional revenue, but then it can never replace physical stores. When the time comes that, people can still, go to the physical stores freely and then don't have to worry about, trying on clothes and getting caught, like catching the virus, people will still go back to physical stores.
Got it. And the last one for me is just on the e-commerce platforms. I think in the start you talked a little bit about it. So is there any so I guess for luxury, what would be the most important e-commerce platform? Would it be like a Tmall's luxury pavilion, or is there any other key leaders in that form of a platform?
It's still Tmall. So
Okay.
I think it's still Tmall and by far. So Tmall has a penetration of about 90% in China. So, out of 10 people who are shopping online, they're probably on Tmall at one point in time. And then now within Tmall, like they also have things like basically Tmall has like a luxury channel, and then Tmall has Taobao, Tmall has like overseas Tmall, and then Tmall also have a Xianyu, which is like a secondhand platform. They're all under Tmall. So if you consider like like other online platforms, like it's like they, in terms of the number of the typology of products that they offer, and then the number of entry channels, they just cannot compare to Tmall.
Okay. Even like WeChat mini programs or like something like that is not as powerful a tool for luxury
WeChat mini programs
e-commerce.
are basically WeChat mini programs. They are easy to use for brands because first of all, they don't need to pay commission to Tmall, and then secondly, like they can create their own templates. So luxury brands like it because that means that it's more luxury in terms of image presentation, and then the customer service is your own service, so it's not relying on, you don't have to go through like a Tmall service. And then when you place orders on Tmall, like the customer data goes with Tmall, it doesn't actually go to you. But then on the mini program, the customer data goes to you, like you own the data. And then the key difference, and then this is a key, I guess like it's going to be like key cap of transactions on mini program, is that Tmall offers like a third party kind of like a validation process of the product and then of the cash. So when as a consumer I'm paying, like when I settle the payment, like Tmall keeps the money, and then basically if I'm not happy with it, basically I can get a refund. Whereas in a mini program, that's not the case. And then cash flow on Tmall is very much protected. You can pay through a lot of different methods, whereby on WeChat, because it's a Tencent platform, so there are certain methods that you cannot pay with. At the end of the day, it's also about traffic. So when you're on Tmall, you get that natural traffic. And then you can place advertising on Tmall. It's very easy to use for brands to, buy for certain advertising spaces. Whereas on mini program, you need to drive your own traffic. So for brands that already have a lot of traction, like Gucci, or like, again, the big brands, that's not a problem for them. But then for brands like us, like Stella McCartney or Givenchy, Marni, it's very difficult for us to accumulate so many followers on our WeChat that can transfer into, a significant level of sales on our mini program.
Thank you. That's very insightful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Okay, one last question. This is from Francisco. So he had sent this in earlier, which was, it's a long question, but I think you've seen this before. So about 5 years ago, a professor from HEC surveyed luxury consumers of different nationalities and asked them to select attributes that most define their vision of luxury from a list. And only the Chinese explicitly reported that luxury meant very expensive and exclusive for a privileged minority to make them stand out. Do you think that's true? And do you think that's changed over time?
No, I don't think that's changed. I think that's still very much the case.
Okay, so very simple question. So Francisco,
okay, so,
that is
so
true.
maybe I can add a little bit more on that. I think luxury brands, they do want to tap into new customer pools. That's why they're making entry level products, and then they're making products like they are making their offer more accessible, I guess. However, like for the truly expensive products, like it's still, those high net worth people who can afford it. And then when you are using a luxury brand, like let's say, for example, I am buying a Dior bag, right? So I would know that if I'm using like a small logo, like a waist bag here, versus if I'm buying like like a Diane bag, the price is like twice for a Diane bag. So I would know that by carrying a Diane bag, I'm showing more status than if I'm using like a logo waist bag that probably a lot of online KOLs like Wang Hongs they probably have. And then so even within luxury consumptions, like the high-end luxury consumers, they still try to differentiate themselves from the low-end luxury consumers. They don't want to be seen as the same, and then that's why like they have to choose more expensive products. They need to choose more exclusive products. That's why that's also echo back to what I said earlier about how like the true luxury consumers in China, they go for new arrivals. They're not here to wait for things to be discounted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, last minute. So maybe one last question we could squeeze in from Calvin. Boutique luxury versus traditional luxury competition. How big is the threat, and how do traditional luxury brands deal with competition from people like you guys?
I would say that they just invest more on communication. In reality, like people like us or brands like us, we really just don't have enough capital, the same level of capital to compete for celebrities, to compete for advertising spaces, both online and offline spaces, and then to compete for resources. For example, like by resources, I mean better locations in malls. Like for example, for me to to get a ground floor location on any malls, like it's actually quite challenging. Like I need to really do the pitch, and then be literally like socializing and entertaining like landlords all the time. But then for Louis Vuitton, like it's the other way around. The landlords have to entertain them. The landlords have to beg them to go into the malls. The landlord even have to pay them to go into the malls. So it's like in terms of and then in terms of distribution in China, right? The more point of sales you have, that's kind of like advertising. And then the better locations you have, that is very important resource for physical stores. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's very difficult for brands like within my level to really compete, unless, like for example, Phoebe Philo all of a sudden decides to come and design for a brand. Like that's a designer issue. Like if you're able to really make a hot collection of must-have products, people will come for you, and then it's going to last a while. For example, like maybe 3 to 5 years, like what is happening with Saint Laurent, what is happening with Balenciaga, but it won't be able to last forever unless you really have that deep pockets to sustain your investment in the market.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you guys so much for attending this webinar, and thank you, Annie. I know it was really early for you in Shanghai, so now you can start your day. And then, yeah, I'm gonna send out a survey and ask for you guys for feedback, because we're trying to refine this webinar product, and would love to know your thoughts and any comments or questions. Thank you, Annie.
Okay, thank you everyone. Bye.
Bye.